every time a church really makes an impact, you can be certain that they stand on the shoulders of giants before them. You're familiar with that idea, right? I don't remember who the quote originally came from, and I think there's dispute. But the idea that if you can see farther than the generation before you, it's because you're standing on their shoulders, and without them, you wouldn't see farther. And so it's a good, humbling reminder for us that we're not really all that we think we are in our current moment, in our current modernity. Did the church in Antioch appear out of thin air in Acts 13:1 and change the world? The grammar of this verse even reminds us, the church being at Antioch, the church that now existed in Antioch. Once there was no church there, but now disciples had been made and disciples had been taught, and a stable church existed in Antioch. What's going to happen through this church is the fruit of labor by a bunch of other people in the years before. Since Jesus rose again, approximately 15 years had passed before we get to Acts 13. 15 years of faithful followers of Jesus spreading his word, building the church. And I think it's really helpful for us to remember some of all that has happened to get us to this point. Remember, there were those believers on the day of Pentecost who, filled with the Spirit, immediately went out into the streets and started telling others the great works of God that he'd done through Jesus. There was Peter and John, who stood courageously before the Sanhedrin. Stephen, who even lost his life for standing before the Sanhedrin. There were the faithful servants who helped teach that infant church in Jerusalem, who did mundane things like make sure all the widows got all the food that they needed every day. There was Philip. I love Philip. Philip dared to go into Samaria. And I don't know what went on in his thinking, but you can just imagine Philip saying, "It is not right that we are not taking Jesus to the Samaritans. I don't care how much we don't like him. I'm going to go." And so Philip heads into Samaria to tell them about Jesus. And then I love the fact that after people got saved in Samaria, the apostles were humble enough to say, "Wow, look what God's doing." And they went and taught about Jesus in many villages of the Samaritans. And then, of course, you have Philip going to the Ethiopian, being sent by God, to the Ethiopian, telling him about Jesus. You had Ananias and Barnabas, who dared to help this hard-to-believe new convert in Saul. You've got all the unnamed believers scattered through the persecution in Acts 8 who went everywhere talking about Jesus. And then you had the ones who went right into Gentile territory, into Antioch, and just went to pure Gentiles and told them about Jesus and told them they could be part of the people of God too, even though they knew back home in Jerusalem this was not going to go over well. You have Peter, his traveling ministry among the churches in Judea, his willingness to walk into the house of a Roman centurion and tell him about Jesus. The reason why I'm recounting all that background is just to say, yeah, the church in Antioch is going to take the gospel to the world, but they stand on the shoulders of a whole bunch of other people in the years before them. There's been a lot of sowing and there's been some reaping, and now there's going to be another season of reaping that's about to begin. And so it's a reminder for all of us that you're part of God's story too. You are just a piece that follows a great big long line of pieces. So it is not by the eyes of sight that we believe that our labor is not in vain in the Lord. It's by faith, knowing that God's got a big story we can't even see, and our little part of it really does matter. And praise the Lord for generations before us who never knew us, but were reaping the fruit of their faithfulness too.